right now. At some point in the next 24 hours, your body will do something it has done every single day of your existence without exception, without negotiation, and with absolutely zero regard for your schedule, your location, or your level of situational preparedness. And you will handle it in a room built specifically for that purpose, with running water, climate control, paper engineered for the occasion, and enough surrounding infrastructure that the whole experience barely registers as an experience at all. You press a button, it disappears. Society has agreed, collectively and without any formal discussion, to never bring it up again. Strip all of it away. No room, no door. No plumbing, no paper, no soap, no button, no infrastructure of any kind standing between you and the raw biological reality of what your body produces every single day without fail. You are somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, or the grasslands of Central Asia, or the forests of Europe. It is roughly 60,000 years ago. The campfire is still going. People around you are waking up and starting to move. And somewhere in your digestive system, a very familiar situation is becoming urgent at a rate that is going to require some immediate decision-making. Where do you go? How far? Behind what? Using what afterward? And here is the part that polite historical discourse consistently leaves out. Did the other people in your group have opinions about any of this? They did. They absolutely had opinions. The first thing to understand is that the human disgust response is not a cultural invention. It is not something a parent taught you, or something a society instilled through generations of social conditioning. Researchers who study emotional responses across populations from dozens of different countries consistently find that feces ranks among the strongest disgust triggers in virtually every group ever studied. Strongly, immediately, almost reflexively disgusting. You do not need to learn to find waste repulsive. The response is already there before anyone explains why. That cross-cultural consistency, appearing across populations that share no language, no religion, no common cultural history, is the signature of an evolved behavioral adaptation, not a learned norm. Evolution built this response into you deliberately, and it built it in for a very specific reason that has everything to do with staying alive. Fecal-oral transmission is responsible for some of the most devastating diseases in human history. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, hepatitis A, intestinal parasites of every description. All of them travel the same route, from one person's waste into another person's food, water, or hands. Ancient humans who felt strong revulsion toward human waste, and who were motivated by that revulsion to keep their distance from it, got sick less often. They survived longer. They had more children who also inherited those responses and those instincts. Over thousands of generations, populations shifted toward people with stronger disgust responses, stronger hand-cleaning behavior, and stronger avoidance of anything that smelled like contamination. Your disgust response is ancient public health infrastructure installed directly into your nervous system by millions of years of selection pressure. Every time you instinctively recoil from something repulsive, you are experiencing the echo of ancestors who didn't recoil enough and paid for it. That is simultaneously beautiful and slightly horrifying, which honestly describes most of evolutionary biology. So what did ancient hunter-gatherers actually do? Because the general picture of going away from camp and using whatever nature provided needs some detail to become truly vivid. Distance from camp was the foundational norm, and it didn't require any theoretical framework around disease transmission to establish itself. The feedback loop was immediate and obvious. When people went too close to the sleeping area, the camp smelled bad. Flies arrived. The overall situation became unpleasant in ways that were impossible to ignore. When people went further away, none of that happened. Problem identified. Norm established. No germ theory required. Evidence from modern hunter-gatherer communities that maintain traditional practices suggests the distances were meaningful, not a shuffle to the nearest bush, a genuine departure from the core living space into the surrounding landscape. Groups with predictable wind patterns went downwind. Groups in hilly terrain went downhill. None of these preferences required any understanding of why they mattered. They produced good outcomes, and those outcomes reinforced the behavior across generations without anyone needing to write it down. Water source protection added another practical layer that emerged the same way. Ancient humans camped near water out of absolute necessity. Freshwater access was non-negotiable under any circumstances. But that proximity also meant the water supply could be contaminated if waste happened too close to the source or upstream from the drinking point. The practice of keeping waste disposal downstream and well away from drinking water appears consistently across multiple documented traditional communities as a baseline norm. The water tasted and smelled better when people followed it. Immediate sensory feedback was sufficient. No understanding of waterborne disease transmission required. Now here's the question everybody has and nobody wants to be the first person in the room to ask directly. What did ancient humans use to clean themselves afterward? The honest answer is whatever was available, whatever worked, and probably a few things that worked considerably less well than hoped but represented the best option in the circumstances. Leaves were the dominant option across vegetated environments. Different plants produce dramatically different leaves. Some are large, smooth, entirely suitable. Some contain compounds that would have made the whole experience memorably awful in ways that ensured the lesson was never forgotten. There is no direct archaeological evidence for leaf use because leaves decompose quickly and leave no trace over tens of thousands of years. The inference is essentially certain anyway. Smooth stones appear at arid and semi-arid sites in context suggesting handling rather than tool manufacture. Dry grass was almost certainly used in open grassland environments, where the options were grass or nothing, and water where available was probably the most effective option of all. The campfire itself played an indirect and underappreciated role in all of this. Light and warmth extended the zone of practical safety around camp, making waste disposal at a reasonable distance manageable during hours when firelight was available. The smoke from certain wood types repelled insects, including the flies that would otherwise be drawn to waste deposits in the surrounding area. Fire was not simply a heating and cooking technology. It was a component of the living environment that made sanitation marginally more workable in several ways simultaneously. And ancient humans living around those fires were benefiting from those effects without any explicit awareness of the connection. Now, let's talk about the nighttime problem. Because nobody who romanticizes ancient life seems to account for the specific and deeply inconvenient reality of needing to go at 2 in the morning. In a world without artificial light beyond the campfire, that situation was not a minor inconvenience. It was a genuinely dangerous problem, with no fully satisfying resolution. Going away from camp meant going away from the fire. Going away from the fire meant entering the territory of every nocturnal predator currently making its rounds through the landscape. Ancient humans were prey. Not former prey, not occasionally prey in unusual situations. Genuinely, frequently, seriously prey for leopards, lions, hyenas, and other large predators that were most active at night, and that hunted humans' opportunistically when the opportunity presented itself. Your digestive system does not care about leopards. Its position on nocturnal predator risk is that it is not its department, and that the current situation requires immediate resolution regardless of what is happening in the surrounding darkness. Evidence from camp layouts and from modern hunter-gatherer communities suggests practical adaptations developed around this specific problem. Nighttime waste disposal happened closer to camp than daytime disposal. Some groups went in pairs, which offers minimal actual protection against a determined predator but provides the benefit of noise, which many predators prefer to avoid, and the psychological comfort of company. And then came agriculture. This is where the story takes the turn that nobody expects, even though once you see the setup, the punchline is sitting right there. Most people think of the agricultural revolution as an unambiguous advancement. Settled life, permanent homes, reliable food, the beginning of civilization. From a sanitation perspective, it was a catastrophe of almost comic proportions. Hunter-gatherers solved their waste problem by moving. Spatial dispersal across enormous landscapes meant no single location ever accumulated enough waste to become genuinely dangerous. Natural decomposition handled the rest. Soil bacteria, fungi, insects, rainfall, all working on modest amounts of organic material scattered across a wide area. When those same people stopped moving and started farming, they created a problem that hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary history had never prepared anyone to face. They were now in one place permanently, and every single day, everyone in the settlement produced waste. And that waste had nowhere to go except the ground immediately surrounding the place where they were growing food, drawing water, raising animals, and letting children play. Archaeological evidence from Çatalhöyük, an 8,000-year-old Neolithic settlement in modern Turkey, and one of the most thoroughly excavated early agricultural communities in existence, found coprolites containing whipworm eggs. Whipworm is not a wild food parasite. It does not arrive through undercooked game or natural water sources. It travels specifically through fecal contamination of soil that people subsequently contact through food, water, or simply walking barefoot through the settlement. Finding it at Çatalhöyük is finding the preserved, 8,000-year-old physical evidence of what happens when a community stops moving and starts living in permanent proximity to its own accumulated waste. The residents appear to have used a communal refuse area near the settlement as a de facto toilet area. Better than nothing. Significantly worse than simply walking into the surrounding landscape and leaving it behind entirely. The paleoparasitological record, the scientific study of parasites preserved in ancient remains, tells this story across dozens of sites with uncomfortable consistency. Hunter-gatherer populations showed parasite profiles dominated by species associated with wild food consumption. Early agricultural communities showed a clear shift toward sanitation-associated parasite species, organisms that thrive specifically when human waste contaminates the shared environment. The transition to settled life made people dramatically more parasitically burdened before civilization eventually produced the engineering solutions that began to reverse the damage. Rome built aqueducts and public latrines. Medieval cities built cesspits that regularly overflowed into wells. The germ theory of disease explaining liquidus. NJ, why any of it actually mattered, did not arrive until the 19th century. The toilet, that taken for granted fixture your morning completely depends on, was not civilization improving on something nature had left unresolved. It was civilization eventually solving a problem that civilization itself had created several thousand years before, finally getting around to fixing it.